This month marks 20 years since entrepreneur and investor Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, first made waves in the personal finance arena. It has since become the #1 personal finance book of all times, with over 35 million copies sold worldwide. Robert joins us right now to talk about the book. And thank you, #1, for being with us. Can you believe it? It's been 20 years since this book hit the store shelves.
I know, I can't believe it. 20 years ago, I printed 1,000 copies, and I thought I'd have leftover, and they keep selling.
Which is a great problem to have. When this book came out, too, you had some ideas in there, but some of those ideas were probably criticized at the time. Talk about your philosophy and how you've been able to change the mind of some critics.
Right, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a true story about my two fathers. My father was an academic, a PhD, and my rich dad was my best friend's father, and he started teaching me about money playing Monopoly. So by the time I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, my brain was pretty screwed up, and I could see this financial crisis coming. So in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I said savers are losers. That was blasphemy. And I said your house is not an asset. So that was in 1997, and in 2007, the housing market collapsed on schedule. And then to bail out the housing and the stock market crash, the rich bailed themselves out by dropping interest rates. When they dropped interest rates below zero in some parts of the world, the savers became losers, and that's why the middle class and the poor are struggling today. Because as you know, the rich take care of themselves first.
So talk a little bit more about that today, because again, this was something that was done 20 years ago, but those principles that you've outlined then have kind of stood the test of time. So talk a little bit more about how that's working in our economy today.
Well, because Leland, they haven't fixed the problems. They just covered it up. They just put air freshener over the problem. And the problem is that our economy is crushing under excessive debt and manipulation of the markets. So you have bubbles today in stocks, and you have bubbles in real estate. And meanwhile, the poor and middle class are working harder, paying higher taxes, and trying to save money. So that's why, my question has always been, what does school teach you about money? Answer is zero. Why is that? So our problem begins in school, and that's why I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's for individuals and parents who know they've got to supplement their own education.
All right. So if you will, give me a top 1 or 2 bullet points then that you want the reader to take away that they can then use in their own lives.
Well, I graduated from school in 1969, so I'm a baby boomer. And the baby boomers had it really, really easy. The trouble was in 1971, President Nixon changed the rules of money by taking the U.S. dollar off the gold standard, and that's when the poor and middle class started to lose. Unfortunately, the poor and middle class is still playing by the old set of rules, which is go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, invest in a 401k. That's a recipe for disaster today, but it worked for the last 40 years. It's going to change. It's already changing.
All right, so great. So we've got the 20th edition book. Any other important updates in this 20th edition book that is now on bookshelves?
The core book is the same, but what has changed are all the reasons I wrote the book and how they came true. Like you said earlier, which I appreciate, 20 years ago I was blasphemous. Today they're true. So the outside of the book explains why my predictions came true.
Awesome. Well, thank you so very much for being with us today, and congratulations on the success of the book and the success of this new one as well.
Well, thank you for the time, Leland. I appreciate it.
Hey, you're welcome so much. Thank you. The 20th anniversary edition of Rich Dad, Poor Dad is available wherever books are sold.